In 2023, a study tracked the daily habits of over 10,000 people across 12 countries. It found that the average person spends more time each day managing how they appear to others than they spend on any single activity except sleep. More time on appearance than on work. More time on appearance than on family. More time on appearance than on anything they would publicly claim to value. And almost none of those people would describe themselves as vain. That is not a contradiction. That is a diagnosis, because most of what we do to manage our appearance is invisible to us. It does not feel like performance. It feels like living. It feels like sharing, connecting, expressing, participating. It feels completely normal. And that is exactly what makes it so dangerous. Let me describe your morning. You wake up. Before your feet touch the floor, before you have said a word to anyone, before you have had a single thought that is entirely your own, you check your phone. Not because anything urgent has happened, because a part of you needs to know immediately how the world responded to you while you were asleep, how many people saw what you posted, whether the thing you said landed the way you wanted it to, whether the number went up or stayed flat, and based on a number, a completely arbitrary count of strangers pressing a button, you feel, for a few seconds, either slightly better or slightly worse about yourself. Then you scroll. And within 30 seconds, you have seen someone's holiday that makes your life feel small, someone's achievement that makes your progress feel slow, someone's relationship that makes yours feel insufficient, someone's body that makes yours feel wrong. None of this was real. The holiday was chosen from 47 photos. The achievement was the one good week in a difficult year. The relationship is held together with the same cracks as yours, just not photographed. The body took 2 hours of preparation and the right angle and a filter, but your nervous system does not know that. Your nervous system responds to images the way it responds to reality, and so you start the day already behind, already measuring, already performing. This is not a small problem with your phone habits. This is a philosophical crisis about who you are and whose life you are actually living. The first philosopher we need here is Jean-Paul Sartre. Sartre was a 20th century French existentialist. He had one idea that once you understand it, you cannot unsee. He said that human beings are condemned to be free, condemned, not liberated, condemned. What he meant is this. Unlike a rock, which simply is what it is, or a chair, which was built with a purpose already decided, a human being has no predetermined essence, no fixed nature, no factory settings. You are not born as anything in particular. You become what you choose, every day. Through every decision, this is terrifying, because it means you are responsible fully, not partially. You cannot blame your circumstances entirely. You cannot say this is just who I am as if your identity were a fixed object handed to you at birth. You are always choosing who you are, whether you acknowledge the choosing or not. And Sartre noticed that most people, most of the time, cannot bear this responsibility. So they escape it. They outsource the question of who they are to other people. They look at what the crowd values and they perform that. They look at what the algorithm rewards and they become that. They construct a self out of other people's expectations and then spend their lives maintaining the performance. He called this bad faith. Living in bad faith means pretending you have no choice when you do. Pretending you are what other people need you to be, rather than confronting the frightening freedom of deciding for yourself. The person curating their social media feed is not just being vain. They are living in bad faith. They have handed the question of who they are to an audience, and the audience will never give it back. Now here is a thinker from a completely different tradition who arrived at the same place 2,500 years earlier. Zhuangzi was an ancient Chinese philosopher, a Taoist, and he told a story that is so simple it almost seems like a children's tale. A man was walking through a forest and saw a beautiful, enormous tree. The tree was so large and so old that hundreds of people could shelter beneath it. A carpenter passed and did not stop. His apprentice asked why. The carpenter said, "That tree is useless. Its wood is too soft for lumber, its fruit is inedible, its branches too crooked for beams." That night the tree appeared to the carpenter in a dream. And the tree said, "I have spent my entire life becoming useless to people like you. And that is precisely why I am still here." Zhuangzi's point is quiet and devastating. The things that survive longest, that grow deepest, that hold the most life, are not the things that made themselves useful to every passing demand. They are the things that refuse to be shaped by external requirements, that grew according to their own nature. You are not a piece of lumber. You are not raw material for other people's satisfaction. The self you are performing for approval is not the self that will be standing in 50 years. The self that survives is the one you build in the direction of your own nature, not in the direction of the crowd's preferences. Zhuangzi would look at a social media feed and see a forest full of people desperately pruning themselves into shapes that the passing carpenters might find useful. And he would say, "You are destroying the very thing that makes you irreplaceable." The third voice here is the Stoics, specifically Marcus Aurelius. The man was emperor of Rome. He had more status than any human being alive. And he wrote in private to himself, "With no audience, it never ceases to amaze me how we love ourselves above all others, yet we care more about other people's opinions of us than our own." Let that sentence do its work. He is describing a contradiction at the heart of the status-obsessed life. You claim to love yourself. You claim your own well-being matters. And yet the measuring stick you use to evaluate your life is held in someone else's hand. You have given the most intimate judgment about your own worth to people who do not know you, who may not respect you, who are too busy worrying about their own performance to think seriously about yours. The Stoics called this living according to nature, your own nature, not the nature of the crowd. They made a precise distinction between things that are genuinely good and things that are merely preferred by the masses. Reputation, status, wealth, the approval of others, these are preferred indifference in Stoic philosophy. That is a specific term. It means they are not bad. It means they are simply not the source of the good life. They feel good to have and unpleasant to lose, but they are not you. And building your identity on them is building your house on water. Here is what the psychology says. Social psychologist Leon Festinger identified a phenomenon in 1954 that has been studied intensively ever since. He called it social comparison theory. His finding was simple. Human beings have a built-in drive to evaluate themselves by comparing themselves to others. This was adaptive for most of human history. Your tribe had a few dozen people. Comparing yourself to the people around you gave you genuinely useful information. Am I pulling my weight? Am I developing the right skills? Am I contributing enough? The comparison was calibrated to reality, to people you actually knew, to a scale that was humanly meaningful. Now consider what social media does to this ancient mechanism. It exposes you, continuously, to a curated selection of the most impressive moments of millions of people. Your comparison group has expanded from 50 people you know to 50 million strangers you don't. And the data you are comparing yourself against is not reality. It is performance. It is the highlight reel of people who are also performing, also comparing, also suffering in the same way you are. Research by psychologist Sherry Turkle and others has found that the more time people spend on social comparison through social media, the less satisfied they are with their lives, not because their lives get worse, but because the measuring stick gets crueler. You are competing with a fiction, and you will always lose to a fiction because fictions have no bad days. The comparison trap is not a character flaw. It is a predictable response to a system specifically designed to trigger it. Understanding that does not make it harmless, but it does mean you can choose to step outside the system rather than blaming yourself for struggling inside it. So what do you actually do? Today, concretely, the first practice is an audit Sartre would approve of. Take one thing you do regularly that you present to others, something you post, something you say at dinner, something you wear, some opinion you hold loudly, and ask honestly, would I still do this if no one would ever know? If it produced zero social response, zero approval, zero signal back from any audience. If the answer is no, that is information. You are performing, not living. You do not need to stop immediately, but you need to see it clearly before you can choose differently. The second practice is what I call the subtraction experiment. Choose one social media platform. Remove it from your phone for 7 days. Not forever. 7 days. Notice what happens on day 3. Not the boredom is expected and passes. Notice what appears underneath the boredom, the thoughts you have that are entirely your own, the desires that emerge when no feed is curating them, the things you actually want to do when no algorithm is suggesting alternatives. That space, that quiet, slightly uncomfortable space, is where your actual preferences live. You may have not visited them in a long time. The third practice comes from Marcus Aurelius directly. Each evening, ask yourself one question and answer it honestly in writing. Did I live today according to what I actually value, or according to what I thought would be well received? Not to generate guilt, to generate data. Over a week, a pattern will emerge. You will see clearly which parts of your day are genuinely yours and which parts are performances you have been running so long you forgot they were performances. There is a version of your life that nobody will ever like or share or validate with a number. It will not photograph well. It will not make a good story at a party. It will not generate the quiet satisfaction of watching a count increase. It will not look impressive from the outside because it was not built for the outside. It was built for you, out of what you actually want, what you actually value, who you actually are when the audience leaves and the performance ends and you are alone in a room with just your own mind for company. That life is not easier than the performed one. In some ways, it is harder, because it requires you to answer a question that the performed life lets you permanently avoid, the question of what you actually think, what you actually want, who you actually are. Sartre said you are condemned to be free. Zhuangzi said the useless tree is the one that survives. Marcus Aurelius said you love yourself above all others and yet hand your worth to strangers. They are all pointing at the same thing. The life other people can see is not your life. Your life is the one happening underneath, in the choices nobody applauds, in the values nobody validates, in the quiet daily decision to be something real rather than something impressive. The most radical thing you can do in the world we live in is to stop performing and start existing. Nobody will notice. That is the point.